Hey, what's up YouTube? I am John and this is The Wealthy Sailor. Today we're going to be talking about lessons I learned from my dad. Why? Because I feel like talking about my dad for a little bit. Some of my earliest memories when it comes to money and budgeting and financing is talking to my dad, and I didn't quite understand how checks worked. So I saw a commercial for Disneyland, and we didn't grow up with a lot of money, so I never went to Disneyland. I still actually have never been. No, wait, it's Disney World. Well, I've never been to either, but Disney World is what I'm talking about. Disney World in Florida. So I remember watching a commercial for Disney World, and I turned my dad. I'm like, "Hey, why don't you just write yourself a check for $100 and we can go to Disney World?" Because at the time, me being like 5, I knew checks were a thing about money, and I thought $100 was a lot of money. And he's like, "Well, you need to have the money there." I'm like, "No, Dad, you don't need the money there. You just write yourself a check, and then you get the money, and then we can go to Disney World." And he spent some time trying to explain to me exactly how checks work, and I did not really understand it. But he did spend a lot of time trying to explain it, and that's always stuck with me because later on, anytime I had a question about money, I went to him. When I got my first real job and got 401k, he helped me to pick out which funds to put the 401k into. Also, when I got my first job ever, it was at Wawa, which is like a deli slash quickie mart slash gas station, depending on how old you were when you found it. Because if you were there when I was working there, there's no gas station involved. It was just a quickie mart slash deli. So anyway, at the time I got paid once a week, and my dad told me that if I gave him $100 a week, then he would make me a millionaire by the time I'm 55. Well, I didn't make $100 a week, so he definitely didn't get $100 a week. But I understood the idea of compound interest. I didn't fully understand, but I got the idea, like, okay, money builds and it builds and it grows and stuff. So once I got my next real job, like after high school, and I worked for a little bit, I had employer match 401k, so I just maxed that out because in my head I wanted to be a millionaire, which was really stupid of me because when I was younger I saw a movie called Blank Check. If you've never seen the movie, don't worry, it's not very good and it's not really worth remembering. But I remember it because I was young when I saw it and I thought it was the coolest thing. In the movie, the kid gets a blank check that he then forges $1 million onto because the kid thinks it's $1 million is a lot, which it kind of is. And he gets the money put in his account. So with that money, he buys a super mansion. He buys all this cool stuff, and the movie's basically about how he used the money to kind of buy friendship with kids in his class and stuff like that by spoiling them and everything. The thing is, though, is that I walked away from that movie thinking $1 million was a lot. And then when my dad later said, "Hey, I'll make you a millionaire," I'm like, "Oh, $1 million is a lot." But the thing is that even looking back on that movie, it is very clear that he spent well over $1 million on all the stuff he had. He had this like super huge mansion. He had his own video game room. He had a virtual reality video game system in like 1994. So I don't know how much that is. He had a go-kart track put in on the property. I mean, I would assume a go-kart track costs roughly what like a pool costs, and you're talking about that can cost $50,000 on its own. So he spent some money. So anyway, so looking back on it, I'm like, okay, $1 million isn't really a lot, but it is if you spend it right. So I remember that later when I was in the military and I was starting to get a little more interested in finance, or at least my own financial situation and investing. And I decided to become very goal oriented, which is why I'm doing this channel, because I am doing very well with my goal. By the way, I'll have an update video for the first of the month, but I'm doing pretty good if I do say so myself. But anyway, so I kind of built off that, and that's what kind of got me to where I am now with the budgeting and the saving and everything. So based off those lessons that I learned from my dad, I ended up joining the Navy, and the Navy has a lot of programs about saving money because a lot of kids end up joining the Navy. They end up buying brand new cars or whatever, and they end up in financial situations. There's actually a lot of people in the military who have actually pretty bad financial situations, and some of it is their fault, but some of it's not. So the Navy spends a lot of time and money to train people about money. So I think because of the lessons of my dad, I was very interested and drawn into these classes, which is why I actually got qualified to teach these classes later on down my career. It's not so much I felt like I had more to offer than anybody else. It's honestly just that I had more of an interest. Um, and it kind of was very eye-opening for me because as for me, who I love money, I love finance, I even love economics. Like that's what my degree is actually in, economics. I really like learning this stuff, and I like learning how people spend their money and how they think, and really this like the psychology behind a lot of it. Even people who are really bad with money, I like to know exactly why you're bad with money because then I can like kind of learn maybe how to help other people who are bad with money on how to not be bad at money. And what I kind of learned was that most people, and when I say most, I do mean most, like the majority of people just don't have a very big interest in finance. Like generally people have an attitude of you only live once and you can't take the money with you when you die and stuff like that. Now I disagree with this philosophy because although you can't take money with you when you die, you can leave it to your next of kin. So I talked to some guys I work with about that theory, and all of us have kids. And they said that is literally something that came to them when they had kids. And I was thinking about, like, you know what, that's kind of something I started to care about too once I had my son. And it's because I think once you have kids, you start thinking, like, well, realistically, your kids don't need to have it as bad as you did, or at least give them some options. Like, my son, I'm probably not going to pay for his college because statistically, kids do better in college. Well, first of all, most kids shouldn't go to college, but if they do go to college, statistically, they do better if they pay for it themselves. It's a small margin, but still. If anything, I'll pay for my son's college after he graduates. I'll repay his loans, but I'm not going to pay for anything up front. And that also kind of leverages my bet in case he decides to do like a year and decides college isn't for him. Then he's stuck with that loan. But he should be stuck with that loan because he signed for it. He agreed to it. He will be an adult at the time, and he knew what he was getting into. But on the other hand, I would like to set up something so he at least doesn't have to worry about retirement. Like if I can put together like a trust fund and I pass away, then at least he's set up for when he decides to finish up working. The idea isn't to be a like his main path, but the idea is to set it up so that he at least has a safety net because I was lucky enough to have that. Now, by the time I became an adult, my mom and dad were both doing significantly better than they were when I was really young. Now, I've never needed to, but if I always know that if I get in significant trouble with anything, if I I deploy a lot, so injury is always like a main thing for me. But if I get injured or something, I can't work for a while, I can rely on my family for help. Part of that is because I never really ask for help, but another part is that they're doing well enough that if I get into trouble, they can help me out. So I want to make sure I can provide that service for my kids. I found that people who don't have kids don't really worry about that as much, and I'm not even saying you should, but it is part of your evolving worry. And it's funny because although my dad never told me that, I feel like he had the same mindset too because the way he set everything up and all that, I really feel like he was trying to make sure I was well off. He was trying to teach me as best he could. He was trying to share knowledge and stuff. The problem wasn't him. The problem was like I just didn't really care too much about it when I was little. And some of the lessons he tried to teach me I might have been too young for, but other lessons I was definitely old enough for, and he tried and I just didn't really care at the time. But I actually learned a lot from him. I learned how stocks worked because I think if you're a younger, like preteen, explaining ownership of a company with stocks and stuff is actually very difficult to do. I wasn't really understanding it and I wasn't understanding why it was a thing. I'm like, oh. And then I just assumed that stocks made money because, when you see it in popular culture and TV and sitcoms at the time, people were always making money off stocks and everything. So I was doing okay, but I don't think I really understood everything. But he kept trying, and he did actually get through my brain how some of the stuff worked. I didn't understand taxes, but I understood about, like, make sure you're ready for retirement. He's the one who told me that Social Security will not be around when you retire. And boy, did I take that to heart. That was my main motivation behind saving so much when I was, 18 working at a warehouse. I didn't really want to put in the 401k. I didn't really want to lose the money. But man, I was so scared of not having any money when I retire. Well, essentially not being able to retire because I didn't prepare for it. Because in my mind, we wouldn't get Social Security. Now that's less of a fear. I think Social Security will be around when I get older. I'm not so sure it'll be around when my son gets older, or at least not in the capacity it is today. But I think I will get it. But my dad spent a lot of time trying to teach me stuff, and a lot of it stuck. And to this day, I still credit a lot of those teachings with why I am the way I am about money and finances and stuff like that. It's why I want to continue to learn. I essentially want to get to a point where I actually know more than what he did before he passed away. Well, anyway, that's it for this video. If you want to give me a like or subscribe or a share or a comment, I would appreciate any one of them or all of them, depending on how generous you want to be. I accept generosity, so if you want to give me all four, totally cool with that. Thank you for watching and keep saving.